to provide the House today with a context for the agreement, a brief summary of the terms, and the implications for the South African economy, investment, and jobs. The UK is one of South Africa's most important trading relationships. In 2018, bilateral trade, two-way trade between our countries was worth 142 billion rand. The UK is our fourth largest export market, behind only China, Germany, and the United States, and it is the seventh largest supplier of imported goods. It is estimated that our exports to the UK supports 56,500 direct jobs and a further 17,500 indirect jobs, bringing the total number of jobs supported by exports to the UK to nearly 175,000. Our exports to the UK support jobs in platinum mines in northwestern Limpopo. It supports our citrus industries in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga. It supports our wine, grape, apple, and berry industries. It supports the auto sectors in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and Gauteng. It supports also beneficiation of platinum through the sale of about 1.4 billion rands worth of catalytic converters used in British assembled cars. This shows across the country, trade with the UK supports industry and jobs here in South Africa. As with all members of the European Union, trade with the UK has to date been facilitated under what is known as the SADC-EU Economic Partnership Agreement, or EPA. The EPA provides for the tariff arrangements applicable to trade between 6 SADC countries and any of the 28 EU member states. The SADC countries are South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, Eswatini, and Mozambique, collectively known as SACUM. A number of products are duty-free, and there are also detailed trade rules set out in the EPA to make trade easier between ourselves. However, honourable members, you will know that following a referendum held in the UK in 2016, the UK notified the European Union of its intention to leave the EU by 31 October this year, though processes in the British Parliament may affect that date. If there is no agreement on the terms of the departure, it will be in the form of a no-deal exit. This will have a material impact on the 6 SACUM countries, including South Africa, which trade with the UK under the terms of the existing EPA. All trade will then fall under standard WTO rules, which mean that the normal import tariffs would apply, and many of our products will lose their duty-free status. For South Africa, and indeed the SACUM countries, reverting to trade on WTO terms would incur significant costs. In March this year, the UK published an interim tariff regime in the event that it leaves the EU customs union and in the absence of a replacement to the SADC-EU EPA. If this were to occur, South Africa would lose preferential access to the UK market on 114 products, affecting exports of some 7 billion rand. It affects, among others, vehicles, auto components, wine, textiles and clothing, sugar, fish, and machinery. In some cases, this may lead to a loss of exports completely, which would be significant for a number of provinces. In addition, the UK exports to SACUM countries would be subject to these higher tariffs, which may also increase the cost of products in South Africa if they use inputs secured from the UK, and it will hurt local industry. There would also be potential loss of trade for other SACUM countries. For Botswana, the cost would be in beef exports, for Eswatini in sugar, for Namibia in fish, fruit, and beef exports. This is important to us, honourable members, because economic slowdown among our neighbours can trigger a slowdown in a number of our own industries. Last year alone, exports from South Africa to SACUM neighbours amounted to 179 billion rand. I turn next to the processes to establish a new EPA between South Africa and the UK. To avoid the disruption to South Africa's exports and that of the region, the SACUM countries engage with the UK over a roughly 2-year period. Talks initially stalled. In July this year, I engaged with my UK counterpart to enable resolution of the remaining issues so that agreement could be concluded before 31 October this year. An expedited process for the negotiations saw significant ground covered in addressing these outstanding issues, and the final terms were concluded by SACUM officials in Gaborone earlier this month. So what measures are contained in the new EPA between South Africa and the UK? The new agreement, which will be known as the SACUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement, will effectively roll over and replicate the terms of trade present in the existing EPA. It will allow for seamless, uninterrupted trade to continue between ourselves and the UK. The tariff arrangement under the SADC EU EPA has been carried over to cover trade with the United Kingdom. The new agreement includes many other details. For example, the quota level for certain products of duty-free trade, health and safety standards for agricultural products, the rules to determine whether a product qualifies as locally made and is therefore eligible for preferential trade rates, or what is called rules of origin, and whether goods that have been processed partially in an EU state can still qualify under the rules of origin. It's called cumulation. Under the EPA, South African assembled cars, if I use that as an example, will have access to the UK, making our cars more competitive in that market than cars made in many other parts of the world. This supports South African industrialization and creates jobs here in South Africa. Tariff-free imports are also enjoyed for our citrus products, for grapes and for plums, while South African wine enjoyed tariff-free access under a quota. Where we have tariff rate quotas in place with the EU, a new additional quota has been agreed for trade between the United Kingdom and the SACUM countries. For example, in addition to the current quota to the EU, which remains unaffected by this agreement, in other words, we're banking that, we're keeping that, we also now have a new additional tariff-free quota for about 70,000 tons of refined and unrefined sugar, for about 18,000 tons of canned pear, apricot and peach products, and for about 70 million liters of wines. The UK asked us during the course of the negotiation for the right of components made in the European Union and which are used in British final products to qualify for preferential access to South Africa. We agreed to that. We agreed to that subject to that same facility being available for South African exports to Britain, where we use components from any of the remaining EU countries, as well as from any other of the SACUM countries. This is important in sectors like food, where there are supply chains that cut across countries, or the auto sector, where a carburetor may be made in Germany, used in a car, assembled in South Africa, and sold to a car in the United Kingdom. The new EPA will also use the health and safety standards applicable to the European Union, and the UK will continue to accept EU model health certificates and plant protection certificates for a period of 12 months from Brexit. The UK will accept imports of specified animal products from establishments approved by the European Union for a period of 6 months, and all of these can be rolled over for an additional 6 months. Now, this is quite important. If you're exporting and you've got to have multiple systems of documentation and requirements, it makes the appetite of local players to export, it dampens that appetite because clearly the transaction costs go up. South Africa currently has special protection, or what is called safeguard measures, in place for poultry imports from the European Union. This is to support South African chicken producers and local jobs. We have now agreed that the safeguard measures that are in place against the EU chickens will continue to apply to British poultry until March 2022, even if and when Britain leaves the EU, unless it is set aside through the normal processes of review or appeal. We've also agreed on a built-in agenda, namely a list of matters for further negotiation after the agreement comes into effect. It includes issues such as the right of countries of South Africa to use export taxes to promote local industries, and crediting South African-made inputs in products made in other SACUM countries where we export these to Britain in future. The new EPA will come into effect in the event that the UK leaves the EU on 31 October this year, and will govern bilateral trade between the 6 SACUM countries on the one hand and the UK on the other. It is an important agreement to provide certainty and predictability for exporters. It will ensure that in the event of a no-deal Brexit, trade between the UK and South Africa will continue on the same terms. This means that South African businesses which use South Africa as an export base to the UK can begin to plan, knowing that their preferential access will be protected. It means those investors who held back on capital commitments, or managers who press the pause button until there is greater certainty, can now begin to export, can now begin to invest again, and they can begin to produce again because we have clarity of the legal trade regime that would be in place from the 1st of November. It means that the thousands of workers from across this country whose jobs are supported by trade with the United Kingdom can feel confident that government is working for them, that government is protecting their jobs, government is supporting local industry. I turn next to the steps that will need to be taken to ensure that the agreements come into full force in effect. The processes to bring the new EPA into effect are currently underway. We did the legal scrubbing in Gaborone, and we now have an agreement that has been initialed by all the negotiators. Once it is approved by Cabinet, the agreement will be submitted to this august House for ratification. A similar process will then take place in each of the other 6 countries. As soon as those processes have been completed, the agreement would come into effect. It would be a new treaty that governs the trade arrangements between the SACUM countries and the United Kingdom. Given the time available until 31 October, it's just around the corner, there's a distinct possibility that not all the ratifications will be in place on time. To cover this possibility, a memorandum of understanding has been agreed, which will allow trade to continue on these agreed terms in the EPA from 1 November this year, effectively until the new agreement come into effect. So we have a plan A, which is ratification by the 31st of October. We have a plan B in place. If there are any glitches in any of the countries, we would be able to maintain these preferential terms in our trade with the United Kingdom. Honourable members, and thank you, honourable members, regardless the outcome of the UK debates on Brexit, our trading relationship with the United Kingdom can continue without disruption. This is important for the thousands of South African workers whose jobs are dependent on this trade, and for the investors who have utilized South Africa as an export base to the UK and to the rest of the world. The agreement itself is more than 2,000 pages long, including its annexes. It is therefore a substantial body of text to regulate our future trade and to support South African industry and South African jobs. Thank you for this opportunity to advise this House on this positive development. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable McPherson.
House Chairperson, the Democratic Alliance commends Minister Patel and the negotiating team headed by Ambassador Xavier Karim for finalising this important trade agreement with the United Kingdom last week. It is important to acknowledge the work that has gone into this deal and succeeding where his predecessor could not. The trade deal between South Africa, 5 other African countries, and the United Kingdom is effectively a rollover of the European Partnership Agreement that South Africa is a signatory to. It allows us tariff-free entry into the European Union on many exports, including our important agricultural sector. Until the 31st of October 2019, this access via the EPA to the United Kingdom will remain. However, should the United Kingdom leave the EU without a deal, this new agreement will come into effect. This gives our industries and our farmers much needed certainty so that they can continue to invest in their production capacities as well as maintain the 175,000 jobs which are employed by businesses and farmers that trade with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is an important market for South Africa and Western Cape exports. It was the Western Cape's second largest export destination in 2019 and South Africa's fourth largest. South Africa's trade with the UK was worth 142 billion rand in 2018 and the Western Cape nearly 10 billion rand. Wine was the leading export category to the UK, with the Western Cape with exports valued at nearly 2 billion rand in 2018. The Democratic Alliance believes that this agreement will provide a perfect platform to keep the status quo into the future and will allow South Africa to build on future trade negotiations with the UK to widen our ability to export to this market, especially in agricultural products like beef and poultry. But this can only be done if government is willing and able to map out a long-term future for industry through policy certainty, export promotion, and access to development finance. Without all of these components, we will simply not be able to take advantage of our trade opportunities to positively grow our trade balance and increase employment opportunities in South Africa. Without manufacturers and farmers, we will have nothing to trade, and it appears that this government is hell-bent on exploring that possibility. The ANC and the EFF continue to march in lockstep towards expropriation without compensation, with no clear and rational end to this debate, which has drawn out for nearly 2 years. It has sowed confusion, seen land sales and prices dramatically decline, resulting in decreased capital investment, all the while leaving productive farmers who take advantage of our duty-free trade agreements none the wiser as to whether they will keep their farms and continue to employ thousands of farm workers. We have prescribed assets, again championed by the ANC and the EFF, which seeks to steal people's pensions so that they can continue to prop up bankrupt state enterprises, which will have the net effect of driving South Africans to withdraw their capital and invest elsewhere. Home Affairs is a modern local take on faulty towers, who takes months on end to process business visas, locking out CEOs from traveling to South Africa to invest and take advantage of our preferential trade access to Europe and the UK. Foreign tourists are routinely robbed due to a police force that is losing the war on crime with each passing day. We run the risk of alienating the very countries who make up this deal, including Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, Eswatini, and Mozambique, by a hands-off approach when it comes to xenophobic violence and targeting of foreign nationals. House Chairperson, as a Parliament and as a country, we must be clear on what we want. We can either be a free trading country that looks to maximize and grow our opportunities that will create wealth and jobs, or we can become a closed, inward-focused nation that looks to reenact the worst that the apartheid regime had to offer in economics. And in fact, a very well thought out document now exists that gives us a clear path towards the first option. It charts the way forward with respect to industrial and trade policy and lays out in detail how trade can add 1.6% to GDP in 10 years. That document is the economic transformation, inclusive growth, and competitiveness towards an economic strategy by the South African National Treasury and championed by Minister Mboweni. It details the tough decisions we need to make if we want to see growth in our exports. It is clear on the choices we need to make if we want to see 1 million jobs created. And it is honest in the hard work that will be required from all of us if we want to see a South Africa work for all who live in it. Minister, you have some tough choices to make in the coming months. You can either choose to listen to the enemies of growth within your own party and kowtow to the hysterical objections of unelected, anti-job and growth hostage-taking organizations like COSATU and the SACP. Or you can choose those 1 million job seekers who see this plan as their last hope. We can use this new trade deal as a beacon for them that we prioritize their needs over the insatiable desire for looting, unemployment, and rent-seeking that the ANC and EFF lust for on a daily basis. Minister Patel, In the Democratic Alliance, you and Minister Mboweni have a friend, a political ally, and 84 votes to push forward with the changes that we need to see. Or else all the hard work and the many hours to bring us to this point of success in concluding a post-Brexit deal will have been all in vain, as we will have nothing to trade in years to come. And with that, we must ratify this agreement as close to or on the 31st of October as possible, and Parliament must spend days and nights ahead to make this happen. I thank you.
Thank you. As Honorable Shivambo comes to the podium, please, members, join me in welcoming the Dominican School for the Deaf Children from Vertibom in Wynberg, who are there in the gallery. Welcome. Thank you, Honorable Shivambo. Go ahead.
No, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I think let us clarify this thing of prescribed assets, which has been mentioned by the Speaker who just left the podium now. The reality is that all white people in South Africa are beneficiaries of prescribed assets by the apartheid government, which had channeled all pensions to benefit the white minorities when sanctions were being imposed against apartheid. They utilized those prescribed assets to benefit themselves. So all white people are beneficiaries of prescribed assets, and when we want to use that for the benefit of black people, they want to cry foul and act as if there's a crisis. Now, coming back to the topic.
Order, honorable members, order. You
coming back to the
scream
topic
and
now,
shout.
Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Emancipation Movement, the Ministry and Department of Trade and Industries is one of the most dependable colonial administrators in post-1994 setup. So whatever they do, whether it's industrial policy or trade policy or issues that deal with tax avoidance, what they seek to achieve is to protect the white minority economic control of South Africa. So the Minister of Trade and Industry comes here to have some neo-colonial exuberance in speaking about our new colonial status in the so-called New Deal with Britain or the UK in general. The reality is that there won't be anything fundamentally shifting in terms of the colonial status that South Africa occupies in its trade relationship with the United Kingdom. So what that trade relationship will do is to continue to benefit the minority white agricultural practitioners and the European companies that are invested in the manufacturing sector. So it is to say that now that the ultra-nationalists in the UK have relinquished their pan-continental project by voting to leave the European Economic Community, South Africa goes to beg that please don't affect the white minority controllers of the economy in South Africa. Allow them access to continue exporting goods and services in terms of what should happen. Let us tell you a simple story about the companies that are listed in the London Stock Exchange that do business here in South Africa. One is that majority of them are incorporated in the tax havens, in the British Islands, in Cayman Island, in Guernsey, in Bermuda, in Cayman Islands. That is the reality of these companies. And they control more than 1 million square kilometers of land in sub-Saharan Africa. That is 4 times the size of the United Kingdom. So these are the companies that we are seeking to protect. So they come here, they are British companies, they are listed in the London Stock Exchange. And then when they export goods and services and products to the UK, we say that those are South African exports. So the colonial relationship that was created under apartheid is not being restructured, it's not being fundamentally challenged. It is just the continuation in terms of what is happening. And which are these companies? It's Anglo-American, which basically has owned South Africa for a very long time. It's London Mine, Lonmin, which together with the ANC government killed workers in Marikana in 2012. It's Rio Tinto, it's Glencore, which is one of the most sophisticated criminal syndicate in the world in terms of what happens. So the relationship between South Africa and the UK is still a neo-colonial relationship And this new trade agreement does not fundamentally change and even shift that. If you check the basket of the things that we export to the UK, it's semi-processed and raw materials in most instances. And we bring from the UK the finished goods and services, machinery for medical purposes and photographic purposes, because we are not manufacturing anything here in South Africa. We are basically protecting the same colonial relationship that existed under apartheid. Now, what must be done? What is to be done? One is that South Africa must redefine its colonial relationship with the UK in both the trade and industrial policy, so that we trade on an equal basis. Two is that South Africa should gain strategic control and ownership of our mineral resources. Because majority of our mineral resources, the relative, including coal, are owned by the LSE listed companies. It's not very difficult to extract coal for domestic consumption, even for export purposes. But it's the London companies that are owning these mineral strategic resources. But South Africa should build internal capacity to beneficiate its natural resources. And then we must conduct thorough audit of all the companies that are incorporated in the tax havens. Because basically these are companies that we're protecting now. And we must build proper domestic capacity to drive industrial expansion and stop this thing of giving billions of rands and subsidies to European companies that come here, and then when they export back to their home countries, we claim that these are South African exports. So this excitement, the new colonial exuberance of the Minister of Trade and Industry does not fundamentally shift the economic basis of South Africa. It is just to protect white economic interest, and that is what has to be dealt with. And that can only be achieved by removing the neo-colonial ANC from power, because it looks like they have not divorced themselves from the earlier years of 1912 of sending deputations and petitions to the Queen in England to ask for space in the colonial table. Thank you very much.
Time has expired. Honorable Flengwa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Planning, especially in times of uncertainty, must always be welcomed, because planning provides certainty. The Honorable Minister has performed admirably in this task in bringing a certain level of no-deal post-Brexit trade certainty to South Africa in respect of several markets, most notably, and recently agreements as regards fresh produce, which is particularly important as we are about to enter the next export cycle in this country.
Please take your seat. Yes, Honorable, what you're rising on?
Thank you, Speaker. I'm sorry to interrupt the Speaker at the podium. When the Honourable Shivambu walked past this bench here,
yes,
he turned back and said to the Honourable Milam, and I really don't want to use this word in the House, it was FU, quite clearly, and it's quite shocking that a so-called Honourable Member can behave that way in this House and address an Honourable Member in that fashion.
Okay.
Thank you, House Chair.
Yeah, Honourable Shivambu, did you say that?
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I did not say it.
Okay.
I wish I did.
Yeah. Honourable Member, honourable members, we will check that and come back to the House if necessary. We'll do that. Honourable members, let's not forget that language that is horrible is inappropriate in the House. Let's not get involved in those games. Honourable Flengwa, please go ahead.
Therefore, Honourable Deputy Speaker, credit must go to the department's negotiating team in securing this agreement, which will come into effect in the event of a no-deal Brexit, and which will ensure that trade in these markets between our two countries, particularly in such a turbulent period, remains largely unaffected. Honourable Deputy Speaker, Britain, through its High Commissioner Nigel Casey, confirmed recently that South Africa need not fear Brexit, as it will only strengthen the current economic trade and development ties between the two countries, with one of the main factors being that our economies are complementary, and thus a greater mutual synergy can be found, and this too should be welcomed. And of course, the former British Prime Minister Theresa May briefly visited Cape Town last year a trade delegation under the leadership of the Secretary of State for Wales, the Right Honourable Alan Keynes, met with the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry at the time under the chairpersonship of Honourable Joan Fabs in late August. Needless to say, though, that Brexit and bilateral trade were the main topics of discussion at that meeting. Aligned to this discussion was the possibility of easing visitors and business visa restrictions between the two countries, as this is often an impediment and barrier to trade and potential trade between the United Kingdom and South Africa, let alone revenue lost, of course, to potential tourism. This Honourable Minister is an avenue which must still be pursued and discussed further and brought to some sort of finality. Honourable Deputy Speaker, whilst being mindful of the fact that state sovereignty and the right of any nation and its people to determine their own future exists, we must say as the IFP that we are a little concerned that at this ever-increasing age and stage of globalization and interdependence amongst nations, the United Kingdom, through Brexit, has chosen to embark on a more isolationist strategy that the current British government is advising will occur with or without a deal on the 31st of October, as the consequences of such action could have far-reaching for the UK and the EU, but for the entire world and multilateralism in general. This is particularly concerning as the world grapples with several crises, such as climate change, which will require collective agreement rather than isolationist approaches to the problems before us. Therefore, the IFP supports and remains supportive of the strong and beneficial trade links between South Africa and the United Kingdom and the European Union, and we encourage the Department and Government to pursue further discussions and engage further for the sake of stability, certainty, and of course to ensure that South Africa derives the maximum benefits arising out of this new course of action that the United Kingdom has taken. At the forefront of all that we do should be ensuring that South Africans do not lose their jobs and that there is an exchange of knowledge, skills, expertise, and innovation so that South Africa can continue to grow, because ultimately our collective pursuit should be ensuring economic growth, economic development, and the creation of jobs for all South Africans. And to do this, we need greater global cooperation. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Ebrahim Patel.
Agbare Adjunct Speaker, Minister Patel, lede. Die VF Plus verwelkom die feit dat 'n onderhandeling en ooreenkoms bereik is tussen die Suid-Afrikaanse regering en Engeland. Gegee die feit dat die Brexit ooreenkoms op hierdie stadium onduidelik is en of Engeland dan nou die Europese Unie gaan verlaat met of sonder ooreenkoms. Ons herken die feit dat dit baie moeilik is om onder hierdie omstandighede te verander. But, Deputy Speaker, the Freedom Plus is however concerned about the future of the economy of South Africa. And there are some government policies that are currently in different stages of implementation or already in act that will most likely have a detrimental effect on the South African economy and influence future trade negotiations and trade deals. The first one that I want to mention is the Consumer Debt Relief Act. The second, namely, the National Health Insurance, the appropriation of property without compensation, the Mining Charter, the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, prescribed assets, BBBE affirmative action, and then lastly, I want to mention the Health or Sugar Tax Act. Agbare Adjunct Speaker, die landse ekonomie staan op die rand van 'n afgrond met sakevertroue wat tot sy laaste vlak in 20 jaar getuimel het. Die regering moet nou alles in die stryd werp om die landse ekonomie te groei en sy onwerkbare ideologiese beleidsstukke op sy skuif. Agbare Speaker, die VF+ sal graag wil sien dat Suid-Afrika 'n ekonomie ontwikkel vir sy mense bo die van 'n ideologie. Ons moet eers die ekonomie groei voordat werksgeleenthede geskep kan word en ideologie dan uiteindelik deurgevoer word. Die regering sal 'n nou of nooit benadering moet volg of dan ons almal saam die wrangvrugte van 'n armoede moet pluk. Dankie, Adjunct Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I make you aware that the Deputy Speaker has just left. But of course, I would appreciate the position. Thank you very much. Honorable Thring, you can take the podium, sir.
Honourable House Chair, the ACDP notes that on the 23rd of June 2016, the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. More than 30 million people from the UK voted, 52% of British voters chose to leave the European Union. With former Prime Minister Theresa May stating emphatically that Brexit means Brexit, and the current Prime Minister Boris, the now Hulk Johnson, determined to press ahead with an exit from the EU, with or without a deal, the gravity of a Brexit with its different possibilities has far-reaching economic and geopolitical implications. And this is certainly true for South Africa and our other SACUM partners. It is the view of the African Christian Democratic Party that the impact of Brexit on the UK economy is of great concern to South Africa's interest, especially our imports. The most significant threat to South Africa will arise from a reduced export demand if the UK economy is damaged as a result of leaving the EU. In addition, old agreements such as the SADC-EU EPA would become obsolete after Brexit. It was hence imperative to reach an agreement to roll over trade rules of the SADC-EU EPA to a new SACUM UK EPA. The UK is South Africa's 5th largest trading partner. Trade between the UK and South Africa increased from 63.7 billion in 2012 to 106.2 billion in 2018. It must be noted, as was reported at our Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry by the Deputy Director General Ambassador Xavier Karim, that a failure to conclude an arrangement would have meant that South Africa trades with the UK on the World Trade Organization MFM terms, which would imply new tariffs on 114 different tariff lines of export interest to South Africa, notably on our autos, textiles, clothing, and sugar industry. The ACDP is in agreement with Minister Patel that a no-deal Brexit without a new agreement in place would hurt the South African economy, further increasing the unemployment rate and resulting in the loss of exports, as the UK is a key trading partner of South Africa. Honourable House Chair, as a protagonist or as protagonists of South Africa becoming competitive in the global economy, and as champions for improving the quality of life of all South Africans irrespective of their colour, the ACDP supports the new trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Mahau.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, honorable members. The Brexit debacle should serve as a lesson for South Africa on the one hand and a red warning light on the other. The lesson is simply that the UK citizens are saying the same thing that African Transformation Movement is saying in South Africa when we say put South Africa first. They are saying put UK first. Even in our continent, we have seen various countries developing country-centric legislation. If South Africa continues to ignore its own citizens, local stability will be a utopia. South Africa must learn the right things from its own former colonizers, that the noblest thing to do is to prioritize its own citizens and engage with international investors with a clear agenda in mind to advance the development of the people of South Africa. Our focus and campaign for microeconomy to be ring-fenced for locals is informed by nothing else but a patriotic desire for a strong domestic economy that is local SME driven so that the majority of our people also benefit. The value of the rand will forever be vulnerable as long as our domestic economy is non-existent and as long as we continue to be modern slaves of the West. We note the deal announced by the Minister of DTI to continue the trade with UK on current terms. However, we must not be naive to think that the UK agreed to this deal without self-interest for its own post-Brexit situation. South Africa should have hedged in its bet and struck a similar deal with the EU so that the interests of our country are safeguarded regardless of the Brexit outcome. There's a red warning flashing in terms of the probably weakening of the UK currency post the Brexit if the pull-out is on a no-deal basis. There's a real risk of the UK currency plunge, which might strengthen the dollar, which in turn might depress the rand. South Africa must therefore not be caught up in factional fights of Europe at the expense of our economy. The engagement with the Brexit matter must not be informed by submissive, nostalgic tendencies of a former colony of UK. The interest of South Africa must be paramount. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable August, you're welcome.
Honourable Chairperson, whether we agree or disagree with the UK's decision to turn its back on Europe, we rather focus on the new opportunities that it presents for trade and to grow our economy. The UK is historically among South Africa's most important trading partners. These links must be strengthened in the new European context. If government does its homework, Brexit could hold important benefits for South Africa through the development of stronger trade partnerships with Europe. Honourable Minister Patel should take the nation into its confidence on our preparations for Brexit. How do we position ourselves to continue growing our relationship with the UK? What current talks are between our President and the newly installed Prime Minister Boris Johnson in order to grow new relationships with the UK? And how are our consultations with the European leaders progressing? What is their stance with respect to trade with Africa after Brexit comes into effect? Honourable Chairperson, it is not rocket science to observe that this increased trade with the UK and Europe will result in more jobs, especially for our youth. This can only be positive as we see the rise of youth unemployment in our country and the desperate need to skill our young people to become employable. Good has always been clear. Directly creating jobs is not government's role. It's the role to lay foundations for an environment favorable to job creation to position our country to succeed. With Brexit looming large on the horizon, the work government does behind the scenes today will impact how our country looks tomorrow. If we are seen to be turning the corner on corruption, creating conditions conducive to trade such as reducing red tape, investing in our infrastructure, building a world-class transport system, securing our ports and harbours, and providing policy certainty to investors, we will be well positioned to benefit from Brexit. Let us not waste the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Let me start off by extending our condolences to the family of our former Deputy Minister Babalile Shlongwa. May her soul rest in peace. Our condolences to her family, friends, and the African National Congress at large. Let me also welcome and congratulate Minister Patel and his team for the good work you have done. Indeed, I think Comrade McPherson is correct that in signing this agreement, you will save thousands of jobs in South Africa, particularly in the Western Cape, because a lot of our fruit in the agricultural sector plays a pivotal role in the economy of the Western Cape particularly. So I think we must congratulate you for the role that you have played. And in that process, I think you may have saved many, many jobs in South Africa. And thank you very much for that foresight into realizing what could happen had we not. Let me also welcome your initiative, Minister Patel, in the manufacturing sector, particularly in the textile and things, and I know that you have a new initiative that you want to put forward in terms to strengthen and enhance the manufacturing industry. Again, let me congratulate you for that. Now, let me just set the record straight on some issue here, particularly that I heard Comrade Shivambu talk about prescribed assets. Yes, indeed, prescribed assets is a great thing, would have been a great thing in South Africa had we been able to manage ourselves professionally in a satisfactory manner. That not being the case in South Africa at the moment, touching on the investments of our pensioners is clearly not a good idea. And I know where Honorable Shivambu comes from there, because if you prescribe that assets, automatically he has control over it so that he can pocket those monies, which is what he has been doing for a long period of time. And that is why he believes it is in the interest to go and prescribe these particular assets. And it's been loud and clear that it has been. Let me also add one more thing, you know. We talk about the UK and the European Union, and particularly, yes, indeed, I must agree that we have the assets. The African continent has all the resources, indeed, but it is not the wealth that we are enjoying today, because it is in the hands of many of the Western superpowers, where raw materials. But let us also not forget that it is your party leadership that was in the UK and that was sipping wine. They were the leaders of the mining magnates there. So, I mean, we cannot say one thing and do something else. So if you guys promote it when it suits you all, and then when it does, then it does. Minister, I just want to add that one very important thing we need to be cognizant of, and that is, if xenophobic attacks continue in South Africa, what is the effect going to be if the SADC countries and Africa as a whole decides to want to stop doing business with South Africa? That can have a devastating effect, and I think we need to actually address that. However, I think the National Freedom Party fully supports the agreement that you have entered in, and thank you very much.
Honorable Carlo.
Honorable Chair, it is worth noting that South Africa is a member of the G20, G77, and was recently elected as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It offers the world a unique opportunity to explore the African market. In a joint BRIC statement that was issued by Russia on behalf of the Union in 2009, there were signs that peace and democracy were among the key issues that the BRICS dominion would gravitate towards in the long run. The statement provided that, as I quote, "We underline our support for a more democratic and just multipolar world order based on the rule of international law, equality, mutual respect, cooperation, coordinated action, and collective decision-making of all states. We reiterate our support for political and diplomatic efforts to peacefully resolve disputes in international relations," close quote. In acknowledging the significance of the BRICS Union in his 2014 State of the Nation address, former President Jacob Zuma stated that, as I quote, "Participation in international multilateral forums such as the G20 have been beneficial for the country, and joining the Brazil, Russia, India, and China BRIC groups in December 2010 counts as among the key achievements of the fourth administration. There is also a great opportunity, in our view, for the BRICS Union to establish a committee on free BRICS African trade to unlock Africa's potential. This can have massive influence on Africans'
infrastructural capital. It could improve our trade relations, create large-scale employment, and produce local financiers, and further establish the African Continental Monetary Fund. If that could be achieved, Honorable Chair, Africa would cease to be exploited by the International Monetary Fund and your World Bank.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much.
The Honorable Untitled Chapter.
Thank you, Chairperson. History has happened, and history will continue to happen. Today we consider an issue which affects the history of this country profoundly. We have to remember that we were linked to the British in the 1800s already, that our gold minings, our diamond minings, many industries that this country developed were linked to the relationship that we had in history. Whatever the pleasant and unpleasantness of that relationship, history happened the way it happened, and today we have to consider what is in the interest of the people of this country going forward. We have relations that go way beyond the British, and we must maintain those relationships with various countries which make for the betterment of the conditions of life of the people of this country. The Germans, the European Union, the British, we must be able to recognize that we are an independent country, and subject to what relations we strike with different countries, that is the road we will take to take South Africa forward. If the British disagree with the Europeans and decide to reduce relations with them, it must not be at our expense. And we cannot be told by anybody whether we will maintain relations with the British or with the Europeans. We must decide that on the basis of what is in the interests of the people of South Africa. And therefore, we will be happy if there is peace in the world, which means if the British and the Europeans sever relations in a peaceful way, that is in our interest. But we will maintain relations with both, and we must do so, because many of the jobs of the people in this country depends on the trade that we have with the British, with the Germans, with the French, and so on. Why should we consider to sever or to disrupt economic and other relations with countries which otherwise have no track to fight us? We must therefore hope and persuade to the extent possible that South Africans and South African business must understand that they are at home in this country as long as they keep such trade with other countries as strengthens the conditions in this country. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Lekota. Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I'm a bit worried that the 2,000 pages the Minister speaks about may benefit Britain more than South Africa. The consequences of South Africa could obviously be huge. It is very difficult to understand what Brexit really means for South Africa. The implications could be far-reaching. What happens if there is a change of government? South Africa can be reasonably confident by the end of 2019 at the latest, the UK will not legally be part of the EU. The biggest threat to South Africa will be reduced export demand if the Brexit negotiations damage the UK economy. Predicting the impact of Brexit on South Africa is further complicated by the need by 2019 to negotiate a final South Africa-UK trade agreement to replace the existing South Africa-EU agreements, which will obviously no longer apply to South Africa-UK bilateral trade after Britain leaves the EU. The Minister seems to be on top of matters, and Minister, your hard work has not gone unnoticed. Brexit is unlikely to damage South African exports to the UK. It could even open up certain offensive opportunities to South Africa, especially in agriculture, and that's why I'm disappointed that the Minister has not given some guidance to the agriculture sector to take advantage of the opportunities. The priority of South Africa is to avoid this default position and negotiation, even temporarily, a UK trade deal that is close to or better than existing EU arrangements. A secondary priority would be to focus on identifying and supporting both domestically and through trade agreements, trade interests which stand to gain from the Brexit change. The ministers are ever not proactive enough to promote trade and get industry for South Africa that would benefit South Africans excluded from the decades of trade, especially during the colonial days and today. It is quite obvious that South Africa would benefit if there is no Brexit deal. So, with respect, I disagree with the Minister and the assessment of the ACDP. Al-Jamaa realizes the importance of exports via inflow, but I think that there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from the initiatives taken by brother leader Muammar Gaddafi, which put Libya took Libya to the next level, and South Africa will hopefully also do that. Thank you.
House Chairperson, Minister, Deputies, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans. Let me add my voice in expressing our heartfelt condolences to the family, comrades, friends, and our comrade Bavelile Hlongwa. Indeed, our country and its people have been robbed of a shining star, a young comrade who still had energy to advance the better life for our people. We are saddened by her passing at such tender age. May her soul rest in peace. Further, one would like to just comment, Honorable McPherson, that it might be actually a bit difficult to separate the presentation of the leadership collective of the African National Congress on the same issue, on the dislike and the dislike of what you like. So-and-so has said something you like, somebody doesn't actually say something you don't like. So I'm just saying it's just unfortunate. The further point, which might be quite important, is that on our part, it is critical that the event of the UK leaving the EU will remain in terms of trade, of our tariff structure, quotas, health and safety standards, rules of origin and cumulations, so that the trade with the UK is not disrupted. To add to this, the European Union as a bloc is South Africa's top trading partner. It is therefore in the interest of the South African SACUM, UK and EU to ensure that Brexit matter is handled in such a way that it does not disrupt the current future trade relationships. The SADC-SACU Economic Partnership Agreement, which was concluded on the 26th June 2016 provides exporters from the 6 SADC countries, including South Africa, with preferential access to EU markets for our products. For South Africa, this includes the automotive industry and our agricultural industry. This preferential access to the EU market makes South Africa imports more competitive versus the other imports, and therefore makes South Africa products more available and desirable. This supports the demand of South African-made goods in the EU and drives jobs and economic growth in our local industries. Our attitude as a country to trade relations is guided, among other things, by the principles of ensuring that trade agreement must advance our agenda of supporting industrial development, enhance South Africa exports of high value-added products, to protect sensitive sectors, as well as to ensure that our trade relations advance regional or continental integration. Being part of the international trade regime within the rule-based international system, our country has benefited and continue to benefit from various trade agreements. We have bilateral, multilateral with other nations of the world. It may be that we desire to export value-added products to the world as opposed to exporting driven by commodities. The UK-EU trade agreement with South Africa and with its SACUM provide such trade platforms where industrial development can be enhanced. Since the decision by the UK to exit the EU, our government, in particular the Minister of Trade and Industry, has interacted with the UK government to develop a principled agreement to roll over trade rules of the SADC-EU Economic Partnership Agreement. This principled agreement will ensure that the existing tariff lines, which includes tariffs on autos, textile, clothing, sugar, are more severely affected outside the Brexit development. As the Minister of Trade and Industry said in his statement announcing the agreement reached with the UK, that, quote, the agreement creates an environment which preserves current trading conditions and protect jobs. If a deal is reached between UK and EU, this acts as a sort of insurance policy, close quotes. We are fully optimistic that there will be any disruption regardless of the route the UK takes finally. The negotiation also addressed matters relating to rules of origin, sanitary and psychosanitary and other transactional agreements were attended to. The former and current Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition have consistently kept the Portfolio Committee of Trade and Industry updated on any development regarding this matter. The legacy report of the Portfolio Committee outlines how the committee and the department led by the minister have worked together in their different functions and roles to ensure that South Africa trade relations with the UK are not negatively affected by the Brexit. The ANC also applauds the inclusion of accumulation provision allowing the development of our regional value chain. The success negotiation of this provision by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition will allow South Africa to source inputs from our SACUM neighbors when exporting to the UK, and will further allow our SACUM neighbors to source critical inputs from South Africa when they export to the UK. The new economic partnership agreement is product of the coordination and work between 6 African countries and is proof of the power of collective African approach can have when dealing with the global trading partners. It lays the foundation for our country to work together and begin in the implementation of the African Continent Free Trade Agreement, bringing an entire continent to a 1.3 billion people working together. The ANC also welcomed the continuation of the existing safeguard measures on poultry. The South African poultry industry is critical for job creation and transformation in agriculture, supporting direct employment for nearly 50,000 people. However, it has been under pressure from imports, which has hurt the industry badly. The safeguard measures against the EU, and which has now been continued to cover the UK and even the no-deal Brexit, provide such additional protection to the industry, while the new master plan to the drive growth, investment and job development and implemented. We have, however, aware that the process of the UK-EU, which may have been an impact on what the Brexit occurs, if it does not win. However, we have pleased to, have the existing occur. South Africa exporter to UK can have certainly they will need to invest, employ and produce without disruption. The ANC therefore supports the conclusion of the SACUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement and calls on the House to ratify the agreement as soon as it is brought before Parliament. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable the Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you very much, honourable members, for the comments. I think what we saw today is widespread support across the House for the agreement. I want to thank Honourable McPherson for his congratulations, and we agree we should use the instruments of industrial funding to leverage more opportunities for the country. I do not agree, however, with the characterization of the South African economy, particularly with the characterization of trade unions as enemies of growth. If we, in fact, can reach agreement with the UK, we can and should be reaching agreement with trade unions, with business organizations, with South Africans on how to move the economy forward, to unify the nation around a compelling vision of growth and of jobs and of transformation. That's our task. Not to exclude, not to walk away, but to include, to be this place, the center that ensures this nation holds and it develops and it builds and it transforms. We are open to trade with the rest of the world, with the United States and with China, with Britain and with India, with Portugal and with Brazil. We do what is in the interest of South Africa, in the interest of workers and communities, in the interest of industrialists and investors from South Africa. And that must be our guiding basis. I must say, honourable members, I was somewhat puzzled by the comments of the Honourable Shivambu. And I'd like to share with the Honourable Shivambu that the overall value of trade between South Africa and the United Kingdom strongly favours South Africa. We import or buy about 36 billion rands worth of goods. We export or sell about 106 billion rands worth of goods. So we run a very big trade surplus. Why should we walk away from this? I want to also take issue with the question of industrialization. Of course, the point is valid. We need to deepen industrialization. We need to do more. We can't just be a seller of raw materials to the rest of the world. But if you look at the list of the top 10 exports we sell to the United Kingdom, number 3 is the export of cars. Jobs for workers in Tshwane, in Nelson Mandela Bay, in eThekwini. 120,000 South African workers assemble cars and make components here in South Africa. We are Africa's manufacturer of cars, producing 600,000 cars every year that we sell in our own country and to the rest of the world, earning foreign exchange, ensuring that those workers have wages, giving job security, providing opportunity, getting taxes that can build houses and provide health care to our people. But on the top 10 list, aside from the 7 billion rands worth of cars, there's also catalytic converters that we sell. And this is something in a car that uses platinum. It beneficiates South African platinum here in South Africa, creating local jobs and ensuring that, in fact, we provide opportunities for South Africa. I'm reminded of the debates we had in the 1980s when we built a militant trade union movement that took on apartheid. When we met with workers, there were sometimes two views. One view is don't sign wage agreements with the employers. And the other one, which is the view that workers accepted, that we had a strong mandate for, is use your organizational capacity and power and enter into those agreements. Make sure that those are good agreements. Our job is not to bake slogans, but to bake bread. It's not to build rhetoric, but to build cars. It's not to dig divisions, but to dig gold and platinum. It's to provide opportunity for South Africans. And so as we move forward, because the statement dealt with Brexit only, we didn't look at all the other elements of our industrial strategy. The meetings we have with the poultry industry, the discussions, as Honorable Sheikh Imam said, with the clothing, textile and footwear sector, the engagements with the steel industry, as we begin to build support and ideas for a master plan that can transform our economy. And finally, honorable members, our job is not only to focus on trading relations with the UK and with Europe, but it's to deepen the trading relationships on the African continent. And so we have signed an African Continental Free Trade Area, bringing together 54 countries on the continent. 27 have already ratified that. And that's how we are going to build our economy, how we move the economy forward, how we create jobs. I want to end by also extending condolences to the family of the late Bavilile Shlongwa, who has been such a dynamic, talented young South African, able to contribute so much. And I think it is one of the memories that I will have, that her contribution, even to the debates and discussion around Brexit, has been excellent. And so we have lost a great South African. Thank you very much.
That concludes the party responses to the statements, honorable members. And the next item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honorable Malema on building state capacity through insourcing of government and all state-owned workers. Honorable Malema.
Thank you very much. Members of the EFF, led by our Deputy President Florence Shivambo, Secretary General Godrich Gadi, let us begin by passing our sincere condolences to the ruling party and the family of Deputy Minister of Mineral Resources, K. Daba Veli Letlongwa, on a tragic passing. It is indeed a loss not only for the ANC, but for the country at large, when a young woman leader is lost prematurely on the roads of our country. This is an indication that more work needs to be done in ensuring the safety of our people on our roads, so that we can prevent such accidents. May a soul rest in perfect peace. We are here today to forward the struggle for development and building state capacity as enshrined in the 7 cardinal pillars of the EFF. We have witnessed a lack of direction in terms of economic development, and state capacity continues to deteriorate. The private sector in South Africa is now bearing the fruits of its investment in Tumamina, as we are presented with plans to sell the little control over the economy that the state has. Today, we carry the mandate of cleaners and security guards to once again provide a way forward that will benefit the poor masses of our people, develop the state, and save money. From the outset, we must illustrate to the ruling party what a developmental state looks like. A developmental state must drive economic and industrial development, independent from capitalists, and provide better services to all its people, build and maintain infrastructure, and build an inspired, skilled, and well-compensated workforce. A developmental state must deliver houses, build roads, schools, hospitals, deliver water, and ensure that taxes are spent efficiently. The South African state, in its current form, does not drive the economy or deliver services because it has no capacity. Everything the state does is done through private companies appointed through tenders. Today, government spends an estimated 800 billion through tenders. Today, government appoint private companies to provide simple services such as security, gardening, traveling, cleaning, general maintenance, and other services. Government and state-owned companies appoint companies to build and maintain schools, clinics, hospitals, electricity, power plants, water treatment plants, sanitation plants, and other infrastructure. Government also appoint consultants to develop strategies, write basic documents, reports, and plans. Essentially, what we have is a state that is run like a private company. As South Africa, we have succumbed to the narrative that blacks do not have the capacity to govern their own affairs, that they must be controlled by a private sector which is dominated by white-owned private companies. A private sector that has no obligation to develop South Africa but is motivated to bleed us dry of our resources. Inflated prices and corruption are one part of the problem with tenders. The other problem is that these companies make our people work under terrible conditions with long hours, no medical aid, and pay them below living wage. The fate of these workers is suffered by many other workers who have worked as contract workers at PRASA, Transnet, Eskom, Dinel, SAA, and AXA. The question then becomes what is to be done. As the EFF, we propose that provincial and local government and all state-owned companies must abolish tenders and insource workers on full-time basis. We have led by example with our councillors in municipalities sponsoring motions of insourcing of cleaners, security guard, gardeners, and general maintenance workers. Due to the intervention and leadership of the EFF, more than 4,000 security guards are insourced in Johannesburg with a salary of 10,000 per month, medical aid, pension, and uniform. More than 1,000 cleaners are employed with a salary of 10,000. Cleaners who used to be employed by private companies are now employed directly by the city of Johannesburg. The EFF caucus in Nelson Mandela Bay, city of Tshwane, and all municipalities that did not have outright winners in 2016 local government elections are engaged in programs that will lead to the insourcing of workers. While there are positive results and correct direction, the only sustainable and long-term solution is national legislation that promotes the insourcing of workers and detenderizing the state at all levels. We have since started a process here in Parliament to introduce an insourcing private members' bill. A capable state will provide the quality of work and can additionally use its procurement capacity to drive local industrialization and development of the economy. South African government at national, provincial, and all state-owned companies must be rescued from the control of Bidvest Company, which currently is responsible for almost everything that government can do by itself. Bidvest is the biggest culprit in employment of outsourced, underpaid workers as cleaners, gardeners, general workers, and provide a lot of goods and services which the state can purchase with internal capacity. The bill was gazetted in October 2018, and we invite all interested parties to make input so that it can be adopted after the recess and before the end of the year. Let us all unite in saving the money of the taxpayers and put an end to the exploitation of workers by private companies that are in business with the state. Let us unite to build a state capacity and free the ruling party from the chains of Bidvest and Busasa. Building state capacity through the insourcing of workers is one of the many steps towards the economic development. I thank you.
Honorable Mashele.
Honorable members,
Honorable Mashele, can you just hold for a while?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members, please.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Honorable members. Order, please. Honorable members, please. Honorable Kadi. Honorable Kadi. Honorable members. Honorable members.
Sorry,
Could
House Chair,
please
can you
not
get
allow
control
this?
of the House, please?
Honorable members, could you please sit down? Honorable members. Honorable members, the behavior is unacceptable, please. Honorable members. Order, honorable members. Honorable members, please. Can we bring the House to order? Honorable members, let us not allow ourselves to deteriorate the decorum of the House. We are all responsible for it. We cannot go on like this. We are all responsible. We are all responsible. We are all responsible members of this House. I repeat. And we take charge of the decorum of the House, each one of us. We cannot go on like this. Honorable Mashele, can you take the podium?
Sorry, House Chair.
Honorable member, why are you rising?
House Chair, sorry, I'd like to take a point of order.
What's your point of order?
The point of order, House Chair, is that I would have expected of the presiding officer to at least request an investigation into the circumstances that have just happened. You say we're all responsible for decorum in the House. You're responsible for upholding the rules of Parliament. What has just happened here is a gross violation of the rules of Parliament. And I would really request you as a presiding officer to at least initiate an inquiry into what has just happened here. It's not acceptable for members to be threatened in the way that they've been threatened.
Order, honorable members. I have taken concern of that, honorable member. I'm aware that we'll make a follow-up on that. Order,
Yes,
honorable
Chairperson.
members.
I don't
Honorable
know.
member, why are you rising?
I don't know what must be investigated because people were talking to each other here. Do we investigating people talking to each other these days?
Honorable member.
For real, Honorable Chief Whip of the DA, people were talking to each other. I saw the president of the EFF speak to another member until they finished. Now we must investigate even what you just said there to each other. What's going to happen? Investigate the conversations of people all over the House.
Thank you very much.
Let's debate insourcing, please.
Honorable Ndlozi, of course, we'll go to answer, check what has happened, and take appropriate measures. Thank you very much. Honorable member, can we continue?
Honorable members, good afternoon. We send our condolences to the family of our fallen heroine, Comrade Bavelile. May her soul rest in perfect peace so that she can rise in glory. Honorable members, the African National Congress has adequately diagnosed the challenges confronting the state and makes concrete proposals to build a capable state. In the National Development Plan, the whole Chapter 13 was dedicated to building a capable and developmental state. And what our colleagues from the EFF need to understand is that building a capable state will be a gradual process that needs careful implementation. Insourcing, therefore, must be coupled with quality assurance measures to ensure that the state is able to improve its capacity in providing services to its people. As such, the NDP notes that one of the main challenges to build a capable state and capable and developmental state is the unevenness in capacity. This leads to uneven performance at local, provincial, and national government. The weaknesses in capacity and performance are most serious, honorable members, in historically disadvantaged areas. The EFF, on the other hand, promised in its 2019 election manifesto that its government will insource all outsourced security guards, cleaners, and gardeners, and general workers, and will make an additional employment of 80,000 workers within 6 months. Only the EFF knows what these 80 additional public sector workers would be doing and how they will fund their remuneration. We are thankful to South African voters that they were able to sift between facts and fiction. Hence, there is no EFF in government anywhere in the country. For the ANC, insourcing is not the only panacea that addresses all the capacity challenges in the state. It is but one of the measures that is being considered by the government. Building capacity in the state involves a system of fair and transparent performance appraisals, lifelong skills development for workers. The acknowledgement of performance, skills development, and fair compensation of public servants builds loyalty to workers of the state and mitigates against inclination towards corruption. A capable state acts decisively and removes those found guilty in misconduct so that the only most committed public servants remain in the system. The public service needs skills and professionalism. This includes offering stimulating career path, ensuring a pipeline of potential talent and innovation is developed across all spheres of government. A capable state invests in human capital that fully understand the constitutional mandate of each sphere of government and the work that needs to be done to improve the lives of people on the ground. The ANC has therefore identified the needs for the SOEs to deal with these capacity constraints. We cannot overemphasize the need to strengthen the governance of the SOEs. The aim for efficient, financially sound, and well-governed SOEs that addresses the country's developmental objectives. The President of the Republic of South Africa has already outlined 7 priorities to deal with building a capable and a developmental state, and one of the 7 pillars is a capable, ethical, and a developmental state. Therefore, honorable members, the African National Congress is not only just talking about the capable and a developmental state. We are not just talking about insourcing. For us, these concepts are not just ideas, but the government is hard at work with implementing the programs. Government is implementing a radical paradigm shift to a comprehensive framework inclusive of resourcing, integration of all public sector institutions, social partners, and accountability mechanism. This informs all levels of government planning through an integrated planning framework. We are confident that the MTSF will further outline the budget priorities framework, labor movements involved on the skills revolution, civil society, and promoting a participatory democracy. We will not ignore the recent reports of the Auditor General, which revealed that municipalities across the country spent more than 3.4 billion on consultants and incurred underspending of more than 44 billion in the previous financial year. As the ANC, we are concerned for the continued extensive usage of consultants in government. This is at the crux of outsourcing, and our manifesto provides a principled decision for government to deal with the over-reliance of consultants in government. This points to the shortage of critical skills and capacity gaps at the local government as identified in the National Development Plan. As this House, we should strengthen oversight, not only concentrating to under expenditure or outsourcing work for consultancy in government. We should also focus more on identifying skills gaps, assisting all spheres of government to improve state capacity. As the government continues with insourcing workers into the public sector, let us ensure that proper capacity building is done at lower levels and that critical skills are maintained at the senior level. Honorable members, the ANC is mandated with the responsibility for the well-being of all citizens. We are looking further than insourcing. We have committed that in facilitating creation of employment in the public service, the following real interventions are being implemented. The government is implementing participation in public employment programs such as the expanded public works programs through a guaranteed placement of TVET graduates, increasing private sector placement for beneficiaries of the public employment programs. We have rolled out the implementation of the national minimum wage to cover workers in domestic work, farming and forestry, and other vulnerable sectors. We are now conducting oversight on the effective compliance of the implementation of the national minimum wage. The government is working on the adequate legislation to give effect to Constitutional Court ruling on labor broking. We hope that the EFF is able to acknowledge the practical and realistic interventions to address issues of insourcing rather than politicking. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Frank.
Thank you, House Chair. It is not difficult to understand why people would rather work as civil servants than contractors or employees of private contractors. On average, public sector wages are significantly higher than those paid in the private sector. This is especially true for unskilled and lower skilled workers in whose favor the demand for insourcing is often made. In the last decade, the government wage bill has grown faster than the wages in the private sector, faster than inflation, and faster than the JSE All-Share Index. As a ratio to GDP, only the United Kingdom pays more in salaries and wages and benefits to public servants than South Africa. The spending spree has not improved services, and it has not improved the chances of ordinary people to get a job in this country. But now the money has run out. The pockets of taxpayers, including working men and women, are empty. And the DA is very concerned and cautious of demands to transfer ever more people from the payrolls of businesses to the payrolls of government. Insourcing of staff at universities came at a massive price for students, parents, and taxpayers, many of whom did not even have a university education. So this is the warning. Ever more people on government payroll, ever more money spent on salaries and wages of civil servants will inevitably mean less money for essential public services, less investment in infrastructure, lesser security for millions of South Africans who rely on social grants, and less money in the hands of families and private individuals to invest and create jobs. The principle of the matter is this: government does not exist first and foremost for the benefit of the people who work for government. Government's primary objective is to the South African people as a whole. So the question of whether to insource a particular service comes down to this: will it benefit ordinary South Africans? In some instances, it will. There are functions in government departments, municipalities, and entities that can only be fulfilled in-house. The failure of government organs to fill critical vacancies has led to an over-reliance on consultants and service providers, and made municipalities in particular the soft targets of state capture. But it does not follow that all government functions have to be insourced. There are core or non-core functions in government that can be better performed if outsourced. 'n algehele beleid wat byvoorbeeld munisipaliteite dwing om die werkers van privaat kontrakteurs in diens te neem, sal rampspoedige finansiële gevolge hê. Munisipaliteite soos die Wesrand Distrik in Gauteng en Mafube in die Vrystaat kan nie eers bekostig om hulle bestaande werksmag te betaal nie. Suid-Afrika se nasionale krisis is nie dat ons besoldiging te laag is nie, dit is dat ons indiensneming te laag is. Daarom moet die regering staatsbesteding verminder en die versperrings in die weg van ekonomiese groei en werkskepping moet verwyder word. Chairperson, the economic reforms that the DA has championed in and outside of this House are not for the political and corporate elite, but for working men and women, in particular people who are desperate to find work in this country. It is in their interest that the public sector wage bill must be lowered and not inflated. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Pambo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Commander-in-Chief. As part of the Fees Must Fall generation, we dynamically linked our struggle to free, quality, decolonized education with the struggle for the insourcing of workers in all universities. We did so because we were first-hand witnesses of the super-exploitation that university workers, particularly cleaners, were super-exploited by companies such as Bidvest, Supercare, Servest, Impact, Fidelity, and others. While the struggle for free, quality, decolonized education is ongoing until total victory, we have witnessed certain victories in relation to the insourcing of workers. In a process that was led by Advocate Dalimpofu, the National Chairperson of the EFF, which included workers, students, lecturers, made sure and ensured that cleaners and gardeners were insourced and their salaries improved from 2,500 to 8,000. The Wits University workers now have medical aid. They are registered for UIF. The university contributes to their pension and they have staff educational benefits. The Fees Must Fall generation, with the full support of the EFF, also fought for the insourcing of workers at institutions of higher learning such as UNISA, UKZN, the University of Pretoria, and UCT. The following institutions are also following the same process: TUT, Univen, and Fort Hare. All these workers have realized improved working conditions and better salaries. The private members' bill, which the EFF introduced here in this parliament, must be expanded to all institutions of higher learning, in particular universities, universities of technology and TVET colleges. Perhaps, President, we should pass a law that every employer, whether public or private, who needs the permanent services of a cleaner, a gardener, a security guard, should employ them directly and pay them decent wages. The issue of insourcing is not simply an issue of economics, but a question of personhood and dignity. It is a question of our mothers who wake up at 3 in the blistering winter cold to clean toilets and wash dirty linen so that they feed their families and children. It is the question of fathers who, despite illness, wake up to clean windows and scrape floors because they can never allow their loved ones to go to bed on empty stomachs. It is a question of our brothers and sisters who have children waiting for them with growling stomachs and mouths wide open in the silent shacks of Orange Farm, Soshanguve, Soweto, Kukuletu, Kaelija. But do we continue to call this work when the conditions that they are subjected to turn them into beings below animals, stripped of all dignity, shamed, and left naked for the world to see? An open wound, open for everybody to poke at, as Fonan would say. Do we still call it work? We refuse to call what the ANC government is doing as work. It is barbarism, modern-day slavery. South Africa is a country at the mercy of capital, and the state, in its current form, does nothing to change the situation. The practice of outsourcing not only undermines our economic development, but leaves an already vulnerable black population in the hands of capitalists who take advantage of their desperation. One cannot expect that to have productive labor force when workers do not earn a living wage. One cannot expect to build state capacity and an independent economy when you outsource services as basic as policy formulation, cleaning, energy generation, and catering and security. South Africa true to its conception in 1994, has failed to liberate itself from the dependency of imperialism, which today manifests itself as private companies running their affairs a state ordinarily should. It is imperialism, racism, because it is a particular worker of a particular African descendant who is subjected to humiliation and exploitation. What color are the workers who were made to drink urine? Who cleans the toilets? Who cleans the toilets of airports? Who cleans the toilets of this parliament? Who mows the lawns of union buildings? What color are the people who you see every morning and every evening crammed at the back of bakkies? Who are drivers of these bakkies? The people who suffer these injustices are black, and they suffer these injustices at the hands of white capitalists. It is because there is a system that is designed to keep them in a state of servitude. It is this system that the economic freedom fighters want to abolish. It is these chains that we seek to unshackle. To this, we must start with abolishing.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much.
Honourable Buthelezi.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu sihlalo hloniphekileyo. Honourable members, at the outset, Chair, allow me to state that the IFP is for insourcing of government workers, but we do not support a blanket approach to insource all jobs into public service. We simply cannot afford it. We do support a measured, constructive, and conservative approach into sourcing. It should not be a norm. We say this, Chair, because we have a ballooning public sector wage bill which already takes a big slice of our ailing GDP. Within this regard, a balance must be stricken, Honourable Chair. We cannot afford to insource work while at the same time we speak of small business development, encouraging entrepreneurial and business ventures. Government cannot speak of a great fourth industrial revolution generation that we found ourselves in, while at the same time we are putting a lead on innovation and we are slowly but surely killing private business and enterprise. For example, Honourable Chairperson, how could anyone then be able to start a small security firm and upskill and provide training to a number of workers while the state compete with the employing security officers and provide lucrative yet unstable packages and cushioned jobs? Honourable Chair, we are not saying that government should not address joblessness in our country, but in the same vein, it is important that government creates stricter measures and legislative regulations and control to ensure that no workers is ever exploited by private firms and enterprise. The dignity of our people can never be compromised for money. It has become all too common that tender processes are flouted and has essentially become a conduit for corruption. Outsourced work come at a ridiculous cost to the state. The use of consultants, outsourced companies and firms is costing the state billions of rent unnecessarily because companies inflate costs when doing business with the state, which does not benefit our people. And this must be addressed through insourcing. With insourcing, we are able to retain skills in the public sector, but this must be done with sufficient skills, with skills transferring, rooting out rot within the public service. It is our hope as the IFP that with employment of skilled workers within the rank of the state, that it will speed up delivery and turnover times. And more importantly, insourcing will guarantee job security for our people. And as the IFP will support the notion that insourcing is the way to go. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Vessels.
Honourable House Chair, the Honourable Makubela Mashele said that government has the mandate to promote the well-being of everybody. She's quite correct, but does government do that? No, because government has allowed for many, many years the exploitation of private contractors and consultants of government departments. You see, House Chair, it's not a debate of having exclusively insourcing or exclusively outsourcing. It is to do it responsibly in the interest of everybody. And that is what government does not do. The ruling party makes decisions based on what is to the benefit of themselves and their cadres. The internal capacity in government departments and state-owned entities are lacking because of appointments made on the basis of everything except merit. Your former president, Jacob Zuma, told the Zondo Commission in detail how the cadre deployment committee works and how that committee decides who's appointed in what state-owned entity and in what senior official position. And that is why we have a lack of internal capacity on the one side. On the other side, it's because of your policies and policies the EFF supports, like affirmative action, that completely placed the emphasis on everything except merit. And that is why we have a lack of state capacity. On the other side, House Chair, we are in a financial crisis. And it's irresponsible to think that everything must be insourced and that we must appoint more and more officials to do non-essential services in government departments. Our wage bill, our government wage bill, is already too high. We need responsible governance. En laat ek ook vir die EFF sê, agbare huisvoorsitter. U sien, dis eenvoudige wiskunde. U kan vandag alle wit mense in die see injaag. Dis nie ras nie. Dit gaan oor wat in Suid-Afrika aangaan. Chase all the white people into the sea, and there will still be poverty. There will still be unemployment, because it's not a racial cause of the problem. And when there's people like the Honourable Malema, who spends more on his shoes than most South Africans get in a lifetime on a living wage, then the money will be finished. And it's nothing to do with white capitalists. It has to do with your policy directions and the fact that South Africa is being governed into the ground. Ons het verantwoordelike regering nodig wat werklik besluite neem in die belang van Suid-Afrikaners. Maak nie saak of iemand aanstel nie, maar stel die beste persoon vir die werk aan. Wanneer daar 'n kontrakteur aangestel word, stel daardie kontrakteur aan wat die werk kan doen en wat nie die regering uitbuit nie, want dit is die probleem. Dit is die kern van die debat. Nie of ons moet kontrakteurs aanstel nie, maar waarop en op grond van wat daardie besluite geneem word. Want u stel kontrakteurs aan, agbare voorsitter, wat u maatjies is en wat vir u geldjies onder die tafel gee. Dis hoekom hierdie land leeg gesteel is oor die manier waarop u goed doen. En die EFF sal nie veel verskillend regeer nie. Hulle bewys dit reeds. Hulle steel die mense se geld deur WBS. Hulle sal dit nie enigstens anders doen nie. En dan wil hulle hier kom staan en wit mense blameer. Kyk na jouself in die spieël. Dankie.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP would firstly like to extend its condolences on the tragic passing of an Honourable Deputy Minister Shlongwa. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family, with the ANC and her friends at this sad time. And the ACDP welcomes this debate, given the high levels of unemployment in the country. The question is, however, whether state capacity will in fact be built or enhanced through insourcing as opposed to outsourcing. Should the cost be more or less the same and the service rendered the same or hopefully better, then insourcing should clearly be supported. The ACDP is aware of cases, few as they may be, but at municipal level where insourcing has in fact been successful and where service delivery has in fact improved. However, on the other side, National Treasury has warned that the ballooning public sector wage bill is unsustainable. In addition, we see there are high levels of dissatisfaction with the level of public service rendered across the board. The question then is rather how to improve the capacity to provide better service delivery. And it is one thing to speak of capacitating or building the state through insourcing and skills development. It is a totally different scenario to use the public sector or state-owned companies for job creation, given the unaffordable wage bill. Eskom is, of course, a prime example of this. It presents the greatest risk to our economy as a monopoly power supply with its 440 billion rand debt. Its problem is simple. It is not generating enough money to cover its enormous costs. It has reported a staggering loss of almost 21 billion after tax for this financial year. This against a 2.3 billion loss for last year. Its bloated staff complement has regularly been singled out as one of the reasons for the power utilities' woes. However, the ACDP, we were involved in the Eskom inquiry, and we readily admit that the financial problems of Eskom are due to state capture, corruption, and maladministration. And while we are in agreement that workers should not bear the brunt of Eskom's poor management and political interference during the Zuma administration, it cannot be denied that Eskom is overstaffed, with some analysts saying up to 66%. The staff complement has increased from 33,000 to a staggering 46,000 in a decade, with the wage bill now standing at more than 32 billion, up from 9.5 billion in 2007. So while the ACDP appreciates the need to increase and improve the state's capacity, insourcing must be both cost-effective and enhance service delivery. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Zungula.
Firstly, I want to extend my condolences to the family and the organization of Deputy Minister UBV. May her soul rest in peace. South Africa is a country that is still recovering from atrocities that were perpetuated in the workplace. The die-hard brokering industry continues to be a sore thumb sticking out and a measure of failure in the labor law regime. We agree with those who say labor brokering is a modern-day slavery. It cannot be that our young democracy is still mired in cheap labor and humans for sale controversies are brought about by labor broking, where brokers make a lot more money than the workers who do the actual work. In fact, contrary to popular belief, insourcing is actually cheaper than outsourcing in the long run. The fact that an outsourced worker is paid less than the insourced worker does not mean government is saying, because the broker still gets the difference. So it is a false saving. As the ATM, we fully support insourcing because it provides decent work conditions for the workers. Workers are able to enjoy benefits like medical aid, various other social security benefits, as well as job security. We, however, call on management to provide workers with the necessary tools, equipment, and regular training so that employees are not set up for failure. Insourcing has many benefits and should improve service delivery because the populace will be served by more happy employees. We have tons of trained artisans who can be insourced to do the work for the state. We cannot be having a government that issues tenders for even minor maintenance, such as fixing potholes. The appointment of contractors, even for minor maintenance, is a waste of resources. Johannesburg is a good example of the benefits of insourcing and how we can build a state capacity through insourcing. Insourcing has an anti-corruption effect in that employees that are not part of tenders that may be awarded by corrupt means. We, however, as the ATM, want to caution and warn the country that as long as Section 22 of the Constitution is left as it is, insourcing may be reversed in future. Section 22 continues to provide refuge for labor brokers who may argue that freedom of trade as expressed in Section 22 also includes labor brokering. We therefore call for the review of Section 22 so that the rights of the workers to be in stable jobs are not threatened. ATM will work with progressive unions to ensure that the dignity of the workers is permanently restored. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable James, the next speaker.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. I want to join those who are passing condolences to the families of Comrade Bavelile. We lost a very dedicated cadre of our movement. The ANC's vision of a developmental state necessitates a public sector that provides quality public goods and services to all, is people-centered and people-driven and geared towards development. The ANC is not oblivious to the capacity constraints that are currently being experienced in the public sector. The consideration to outsource is informed on a case-by-case basis and is employed after due consideration of the availability of resources and the specific needs at the time. The process has also been applied in specific cases where skills transfer and training to build capacity in public sector employees is necessitated. It is important to note that outsourcing is not done for its own sake, but its necessity depends on capacity across government. Hence, it is considered and employed on a case-by-case basis. The rationalization of outsourcing finds expression in cases where it is cost-effective for government to build capacity in-house to deliver service and in the short term. The decision to use external services providers is not taken arbitrarily. The Municipal Systems Act has a list of considerations that must be taken into account. These include cost-benefit analysis of the option to outsource our use in-house services, the capacity and potential future capacity of the municipality to devise services in-house. Outsourcing of public services was initially viewed as a means of providing opportunity for small businesses to enter certain markets and grow. State-owned enterprises provided the opportunity for such growth, allowing small businesses the opportunity to participate as bidders in the procurement of certain service in its value chain. The challenges of outsourcing have been manifest. We want to note that. From challenges in the tender system and declining quality in output that has not met contractual expectations has brought into question the notion. Hence, the manifesto commitment of the ANC arises from this experience. Outsourcing has lost credibility and public trust owing to the fact that it has been used as a vehicle to enriching some individuals at the expense of workers who in most cases are vulnerable due to the fact that they are low-skilled, low-paid, have low or no bargaining power. In addition, the cost of contracting out has in many cases been far more expensive. We are mindful of the fact that both the PFMA and MFA prescribe certain procedures that need to be followed. Outsourcing has resulted in exploitative practices by employers of contracted workers and in many cases weaken the organized working class to the benefit of the few. Services organized all point to this. The assumption that contracted workers will have the experience of those they replace has not been validated. The emerging view that informs the manifesto draft is that it may be better to employ outsourced workers in-house and retain their skill as a means of reinforcing and building state capacity. The practice of insourcing has the advantage of providing better conditions of employment for workers as well as job security. While this practice is desirable, it can only be exercised within the limits of the needs of government and/or its enterprises with a view to the availability of financial resource. Insourcing is not, as the sponsors of the motion want us to believe, a panacea for building state capacity. Building state capacity is a far larger project that involves far more than insourcing workers. It can be an end in itself, but rather an assessment of a case-by-case basis with the desirability of the outsourced workers to be insourced. It must be the results of a conscious plan that takes into account all factors to ensure sustainability of the jobs created. Many countries have experimented within the two practices of insourcing and outsourcing, and the results have been varied. Britain employed the practice of outsourcing, which had an objective of driving down state spending. The practice yielded about 25% reduction in spending, while there was a notable rise in corruption-related scandals with regards to awarding of contracts with big business, crowding out small firms from the bidding process. The cost of outsourcing of public services has been borne out by ordinary South Africans who suffer from poorer service delivery, as the companies who get the contract are prone to cost-cutting in order to maximize profit. This has manifested itself in the collapse of certain functions and corruption, leading to the overall weakening of the state. The primary objective of the companies that benefit from outsourcing is to generate profit for its shareholders. And this approach leads to accumulation at the expense of the workers. Insourcing is proving to be a more developmental exercise as a result of job security, better wages, and purchasing power, and increased labor stability. Insourcing has been exercised locally in many different areas where it has worked. The practice has been exercised by universities. Insourcing does not just ensure fair and decent employment, but it also serves to protect the dignity, safety, integrity of workers. This in turn creates loyalty and high morale among workers, and consequently it translates to high quality services. So when we speak about this, we don't speak because we want to sound revolutionary more than others, but we want to better the conditions of those who are doing work and the condition of those who are receiving our services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Arts.
Honourable Chairperson, in challenging economic times of massive unemployment and poverty, the idea of a state that provides decent jobs for all its people can be intoxicating. But there's a factory-built flaw. It is precisely in economic times such as these that bloated governments and staff complements at state-owned companies radically curtail the state's ability to deliver services to the people. We have seen the mismanagement and debt that have afflicted state-owned companies. What security is there for workers if companies like Eskom must continue to borrow money from government to pay staff and operational costs? When the wage bills are paid, just a few crumbs remain to provide critical services to those who most need them and to narrow inequity. Workers are the backbone of economies. The more people have jobs, the more people have money to spend, and the more economy grows. The more the economy grows, the further we progress down the road of restoring dignity to the majority of people in our land whom the apartheid government sought to humanize. The state's role is not to employ the unemployed, but together with the private sector to create a good conditions in which the people develop its skills appropriate to the economy and economic environmental conducive to investment, growth and job creation. The private sector is not a secondary partner in this quest. The state procures billions of rands worth of goods and services from privately owned companies every week. Therefore, we have the right to know that workers' rights are adequately protected, that they are being upskilled, earning market-related salaries, and that the companies are operating within the ambit of our labor law. When we have created these conditions across the business landscape and fixed government and its state-owned entities, perhaps we'll be in a more appropriate position to discuss insourcing. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Let me start off by saying that, we cannot have a blanket approach in terms of insourcing. However, insourcing can have a very positive impact on the economy. And let me tell you how. When you deal with consultants, I give a good example. Consultancy and companies that do consultants are paid an X amount of money. 1 or 2 people benefit out of this organization. But if you rather use that money and insourced, you would employ 20, 30 or 40 people. 20, 30 or 40 people will spend that money in the economy, will develop and enhance the economy. But what do the 1, 2 or 3 people do? They use 10% or 2% of the money, the rest of it, they are hoarding it. It's not circulating in the economy. So that is what outsourcing basically does if you encourage outsourcing in the country. Now, one of the things we should be looking at, if you take schools, if you take police stations, if you take clinics, if you take hospitals, we should be building them through insourcing our own people. But given the fact that we have serious challenges, particularly with ESCOM and others, why not consider a public-private situation where you get the public sector involved with the private sector, and then together we create this industry and you build your schools, you build your clinics, you build your hospitals, you build your police stations, rather than outsourcing everything with the tender system. We've said before that the tender system at the moment, a loss to the fiscus is in the region of 200 to 240 billion rand as a result of corruption. That is starting from local level alone. And I'll give you a good example. Let me give you a good example. Take Josini. There's a contract that was given from A to B, from B to C, from C to D. D only got paid 500,000, but the contract was 2 million rand. So what is it basically happening? People in between are enriching themselves, and that is why the level of inequality in South Africa is continuing. So if you want to address the inequality and create more jobs, maybe we need to consider that. Let's build our own schools, let's build our own colleges, let's build our own hospitals, let's build our own police stations. And that's the route to go if you want to create a better economy in South Africa at the moment. The skills shortage, we have a serious challenge. The TVET colleges are still not speaking to the skills needs of the country. They're not. They're working in silos. And that is why you're going to have to continue, despite a circular in 2016-27 about all outsourcing and limiting it, it is not happening because you don't have the skills in the country.
Thank you. Honorable Mbele.
A starting point would be just to respond to some points made by previous speakers about the shortcomings and deficiencies in some outsourcing situations. And the key point there is that it's not the inherent nature of outsourcing that causes challenges like those mentioned by Honorable Sheikh Imam. It is the misapplication of outsourcing. If you have open, competitive, and unbiased bidding processes, then you will not have that kind of corruption. And Chairperson, in that vein, a major risk that reckless and indiscriminate insourcing of the kind proposed by the EFF poses is that it will be squeezing the opportunity space for small businesses. For better or worse, the state is one of the largest single buyers of goods and services in our economy, and its purchasing power can and should be used to create and expand economic opportunities that promote broad prosperity. There are thousands of small businesses that benefit from government procurements, and in so doing, they provide employment, labor absorption, and skills development opportunities and livelihoods for thousands of households. At a time of high and rising unemployment, the last thing our country needs is further job losses from ill-considered or misapplied insourcing policy. Rather, as the DA has repeatedly stated, the number one item on the agenda must be job-creating economic growth and consequently disregarding anything which undermines that agenda. And that is why part of the DA's policy approach to supporting small businesses is advocating for supply chain inclusion and implementing it as far as practically possible where we govern. We are committed to being an opportunity party leading opportunity governments that build an opportunity society for all. But Chairperson, I would be remiss if I failed to highlight a less obvious but key danger concerning this debate on insourcing. Without wanting to sound McCarthyist, this danger is most aptly labeled as the Red Menace. When we consider that the EFF wants to nationalize almost anything of economic value that it lays sight upon, this impulse, combined with vacuum cleaner insourcing, of sucking in all contract workers indiscriminately into full-time state employment, would result in little more than a huge labor aristocracy job scheme, ready for manipulation as a patronage system for politically partisan or other narrow ends. That is the cronyist disease we must reveal as lurking within the Trojan horse of the EFF's insourcing rhetoric, when we consider in view of their full and horrifying socialist vision. If anyone thought on points engineering was bad, wait until the Marcus-Leninist nightmare of social engineering comes true.
Tatun Shaisa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Insourcing for players, good as it may be, but we have got to do checks and balances. The complexity of this debate is amplified by the current economic woes that South Africa finds itself in. Any motion that seeks to insource employees working under government entities has a good chance of being affirmed by the proletariat and the working class. The dictatorship of proletariat dictum, ideological, sounds like a noble and a pro-communist slogan. As socialists, there are questions perhaps that we need to interrogate. In economic hardships, should we still pursue measures that will cripple our economy? We should guard against that. Will the insourcing of workers by government entities improve our social and economic capital in areas such as health, education, infrastructure, and development? If public service wage bill is bloated, what end in sight will the insourcing of workers by government entities achieve? Honorable Chair, we are grappling with these questions. Our research data indicates that insourcing workers without tightening the retrenchment requirements will be an exercise in futility. We also gathered that insourcing workers in turbulent economic times will lead to fiscal crisis. Chair, to achieve this motion, we will have to grow our economy by 5% annually. Then we pay our national debt, which currently sits at 3 billion. We also address the policy certainty and the investor confidence and reskill our workers. Of course, Chairperson, we must never lose sight of the pressing priorities that confront us. As the Kgang Moseneng puts it, there are times when it is more appropriate to become a pine tree than a willow tree. This is not the time, I believe. We need quality jobs so as to develop the state and grow our economy. We should against the workers becoming victims of the circumstances and the fourth industrial revolution. We should also guard against the increasing number of unemployment in our country. The fact is, the capital state will never create proper and decent jobs. I thank you.
Sithokoza Mhlonishwa. Mhlonishwa Hendricks.
Honorable Chair, let me share with the House that after the ANC dismissed 200 workers in the city of Johannesburg who cleaned the streets of Johannesburg, the DA eventually insourced all of them. Thank you very much, the DA, for setting an example to the country to insource workers. Al-Jamaa played a very important role in that. One councillor managed to assist the workers and eventually succeeded. That's why they want to make him the new mayor of the city of Johannesburg. Honourable Chair, Al-Jamaa supports the position of Honourable Julius Malema to build state capacity and the government department to stop supporting labour brokers and be clients that help oppress workers, denying them decent work. South Africa is a signatory to the Convention on Decent Work. Each year an award is made in November, and President Mandela was the first recipient, followed by our darling Winnie Mandela. 5 parliaments have failed the country in not implementing this undertaking. Decent work requires workers to have dignity and enjoy pension funds, medical aid facility benefits, job security, as well as opportunities for promotion and skills development. It is time we examine how many workers working for the state in all 3 tiers of government that do not enjoy decent work, and start to give them the dignity our Constitution demands and not the job impoverishment that they have to suffer. Al-Jamaa thanks the EFF for raising this great challenge and for Honourable Pambela for stating the case so strongly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honourable Matsoni.
House Chairperson, firstly, may I extend my sincerest condolences to the ANC and to the family of Deputy Minister Hlongwa. May she rest in peace. She was a real asset to our country, and her loss is felt by us all. Over 10 million South Africans are unemployed. State-owned entities have been used as an ANC employment agency for years and years. These employment agencies have led to the country's economic quagmire that it finds itself in, and given all that we know about state capture, it has all but destroyed our economy. We simply do not have the luxury to waste time in hoping that state-owned entities will turn around the economy. The harsh truth has been thrust upon us. Even the strongest opponents to privatization, or at least part thereof, have to realize that it is not business as usual. Doing the same thing over and over again, but getting the same result, always hoping for a different outcome, is nothing less than insanity. A free market economy contributes to political and civil freedom. It contributes to economic freedom and transparency, and it ensures competitive markets. Supply and demand create competitions which help ensure that the best goods or services are provided to the customer at the lowest possible price. The country needs to be investment friendly. It must be a safe and easy place to do business. We need to create an environment of competition that allows more investors to come in, open up, and create jobs. State-owned entities on their own can lead us only to the direct path of the IMF's door. This is absolute proof, undeniable evidence that state-owned entities pose the biggest risk to our country and that of the economy. There are many problems associated with the use of state-owned entities as employment agencies. When the government forces businesses or state-owned entities to hire union workers, it discriminates against non-union workers, causing them to be at a severe disadvantage or, quite frankly, permanently unemployed. Unions exist primarily to keep out competition. They are state-protected cartels like any other. We cannot risk being held ransom. It is too easy, and it happens too often. It is because political ideology is trumping political pragmatism. And I can assure you of this. I today talk on behalf of the pensioners who have had their salaries stolen from the VBS Bank. And I speak on behalf of the security guards and cleaners at VBS that now no longer have their jobs. How much more can we endure? How many more times do we need to catastrophically fail at service delivery until we finally realize that cadre deployment is a disaster and only the best person for the job should be considered? The DA will work to get a job in every home and to ensure that the markets are open, competition is allowed to flourish, and that legislation ensures the growth of the economy.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of State Security, Honourable Dodger, to take the debate.
Chairperson and honourable members, good afternoon. At the outset, we would like to welcome the debate about some of the proposed approaches and efforts to build the capacity of the state to deliver quality services to our citizens. This debate is very critical because it touches on the strategic challenges that face our country, which is the creation and retention of decent jobs for our people. While it is important to respond directly to the proposed focus on government and state entities with regard to insourcing of workers, it is also critical that we approach the issue of jobs holistically as to involve all critical players in our economy. We must work with our social partners and the private sector in finding solutions that will build the capacity of the state while creating and protecting decent jobs for our people. As government, we have done a great deal of work to bring together the collective energies of these different role players in an effort to find a lasting solution to the strategic challenge of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. The stimulus package that we adopted following our successful job summit requires the efforts of all of us to achieve our social and economic goals, especially on the issue of decent jobs. Regarding the specific issue raised by the Honourable Malema, we have to admit that our experience has confirmed over the years that outsourcing of jobs generally carries with it negative social challenges and far-reaching impact on job security and employee benefits such as pension and medical aid. Social effects of this are experienced in varying degrees by the outsourced workers. It is tried, and research has shown overwhelmingly that in the context of unregulated outsourcing, outsourced and casual workers often end up with lower wages and fewer employee benefits than they actually deserve. This is why, Honourable Chairperson and members of the ANC has in its manifesto committed to develop a short and medium-term plan to insource support services back into the public service. A cost-benefit analysis will have to be embarked upon, which will determine the pace and scale of the implementation of this program. As this is not a new call or idea, we will continue to build on the work that we already started almost 10 years ago at the eThekwini municipality, where we insourced the security management units under community and emergency services. This program has proven to be successful, and we will continue to explore other areas of intervention to accelerate the program. A security company will charge a client $14,500 for a grade C level entry guard. And the client company will pay $4,000, and they will pay the guard $4,377 per month as their basic salary. Government employed security guards compare the same as if the product or the employee is procured from the private sector. So it becomes more expensive for government and the client company. In this current financial year, we have also started a pilot project of insourced refuse removal at Umlazi, covering all municipal areas. Impela, and a few months of implementation of this project, the Metro is already seeing positive results in terms of the quality of services and feedback from residents. Honourable members will recall that we are seized with the overarching process of the reconfiguration of government as part of the broader exercise of the macro configuration of the state. And part of that work is to explore workable models in employment practice, talent search, performance management and development, which in part will involve options for outsourcing where it makes economic sense to do that. Ultimately, the macro configuration of the state project will inform us of the nature and character of the public service that we all seek to build for the future. It is important that we build a public service that has adequate systems to measure performance and deliver of quality services in particular. Driven by the policy direction and as contained in the National Development Plan, We're also exploring cutting-edge initiatives to make the public service an attractive employer of choice. This includes training and development programs in critically scarce skills in different areas. We cannot achieve this without providing an attractive package to these young people, which will not only guarantee their the career growth path and development, but also a sustainable future in the job market. In welcoming the debate on insourcing of government services, the challenge for all of us is to try and use our collective wisdom to find solutions for the social and economic challenges of our country. It is also our belief that insourcing of non-essential services will result in the following: improved service delivery, decent jobs and job security for all workers, reduced budget expenditure in the public purse. As members of parliament, we must also assist government efforts towards the achievement of decent jobs, increase in real employment, which will also boost our economy. There is no time for grandstanding. Our country needs all the energies we can deploy to end the scourge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. Let us work towards the implementation of the ANC's election manifesto. Comrade Bavelile was writing her own chapter in South African history books. Losing her so young is even more devastating because her story has now been cut short. She had so much to offer, touched so many lives as she journeyed through life. Condolences to her family, colleagues, friends, and her family, the African National Congress. May her soul rest in eternal peace. Hamba kahle Mbokodo.
Ra leboga. Mohlomphehi Malema.
Thank you very much. I think that the notes of the minister were supposed to be given to Honorable Shelley because she didn't necessarily understand the subject matter. And therefore she's extremely challenged. She asked a question that the EFF said in its manifesto 80,000 jobs must be created, and where will the money come from? But the reality is that there are 123,000 jobs, vacancies now, budgeted for. That's where the money is, Ceci. Just check, you can even do the Google, it's simple. So there can be more than 80,000 jobs created now with the budget which exists now. So, you know, that's why we will quickly miss people like Bavelile, because the young, when they stand here, they should, you know, represent ideas and not some backwardness which is unfounded. I think the DA should have asked our mayor of Johannesburg to come and engage in this debate, because our mayor of Johannesburg, the EFF mayor, Mashaba, understand the insourcing much better. Because during outsourcing, we were spending 571 million. During insourcing, we're spending 466 million, meaning there is a save of 100 million from insourcing. Motion tabled by the EFF, and it's successful. There is no way that insourcing can create jobs, because we all know that the private sector is driven by profit. They always inflate prices. If a can of Coke is 20 rand, once you outsource it and say a company must go and buy it, they will sell it to the state at 80 rand. We all know that. They've never sold it at 19 rand or 21 rand. It's a simple logic. So it is the insourcing which is going to save us jobs. The Freedom Front person here says the affirmative action is the one that made the state capacity to be bad because we prioritized affirmative action. So he's simply saying that it is white people who are excelling with doing good things. Blacks are not good. Racists will never hide their racism. At every given opportunity, they will always show who they are. There is no such a thing as affirmative action creating
Ra
lack of
leboga.
state capacity. If we insource, we save money,
Thank
we
you very
create
much.
more jobs, and our economy will grow. Thank you very much.
Ra leboga. Thank you. That concludes the debate. We now go to motions without notice. Thank you. Order.